In the quiet town of Beacon Falls, Emily Harper found peace in routine until love walked in with an apron and a mystery. A soft April wind rattled the chimes above the door of Deli and Brew as Emily pushed it open, the scent of cinnamon rolls and black coffee curling into the air. The booths by the windows were mostly full, retirees lingering over crossword puzzles, young mothers spooning oatmeal into distracted toddlers, a pair of off-duty firemen trading stories over syrup-sticky pancakes. In the far-right corner, seated beneath a faded photograph of the town's first schoolhouse, Mr. Fletcher sipped from his chipped blue mug. "You're late, Miss Harper," he said without looking up. "I'm a teacher, not a clock," Emily replied, sliding into the booth across from him. She placed her canvas tote on the floor, the corners of graded essays peeking out. He glanced over the rim of his cup. "Still waters run deep, Em. You just need to know where to look." The phrase was half wisdom, half challenge, and she responded with a smirk. "You've been waiting to use that one, haven't you?" Mr. Fletcher chuckled, folding his newspaper. "It came to me somewhere between the comics and the obituaries." A server passed behind them, calling out, "Meatloaf specials out," to the kitchen window. Emily looked outside, the lake shimmered in the morning sun, its surface barely rippling. Life here was slow, deliberate. Safe. But safety had its edges, too. By early afternoon, Emily found herself walking the curved path down to the dockside. The bar sat at the edge of the lake like it had been dropped there by accident, wooden, modest, with ivy crawling up one side and a row of Adirondack chairs out front. Inside, the bar smelled faintly of lemon oil and lake water. A radio on the shelf hummed out a cover of Unchained Melody in soft static. Theo was behind the counter, polishing glasses with an absent rhythm. He looked up when she entered, smile flickering across his face. "I figured you'd stop by." "You figured right," she said, taking her usual seat. Rough day of literary rebellion. One student wrote an essay about Macbeth as a misunderstood anti-hero. Another said Gatsby was just a thirsty guy. Theo laughed quietly, setting down a clean glass. He poured her a lemonade and handed it over without a word. They talked about small things, upcoming town events, whether the lilacs had bloomed early, the possibility of taking a weekend trip to Cape Cod in June. She asked if he'd ever been to Provincetown. "Once," he said. "Didn't have time to explore. I was traveling through." It was always that way with Theo. Vague around the past, grounded in the present. The sky began to melt into orange by the time they brought out dinner. Emily had packed pasta salad and lemon bars. Theo made grilled cheese with tomato slices cooked just long enough to caramelize. They set everything on the bar like a makeshift picnic, laughing over mismatched forks. Then, her phone buzzed. "Sabrina." Emily hesitated, then answered. The video call connected, revealing her sister's perfectly made-up face, lit by a backdrop of skyline windows and modern lighting. "Hey," Emily said cautiously. Finally, Sabrina breathed. "You've been ghosting me all week." "I've been busy." "With what?" "More Hamlet essays." Sabrina's tone was half joke, half dismissal. Then her eyes shifted. "Is that a bar behind you?" Theo didn't speak. He just stood there, slicing another tomato. Sabrina leaned closer to the camera. "Is that your boyfriend?" "Yes." Sabrina blinked. "You're seriously dating a bartender?" Emily inhaled slowly. "He's not." "Don't get defensive," her sister cut in, smiling as if it were a favor. "I'm just surprised. I mean, you went to Boston College. Magna cum laude. Now you're dating someone who pours drinks for a living." Theo didn't flinch. He just rinsed his hands and returned to the stove. Emily ended the call with a polite excuse and silence that hung in the air. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You don't have to be," Theo said, handing her a fresh lemonade. "She doesn't know me." Emily looked at him then. Really looked. The way his jaw set but his eyes stayed calm. The way he didn't say more than necessary, but said everything in the way he moved. Later that night, after he'd closed the bar and she'd gone home, Theo sat at his small kitchen table, the light above casting a soft cone over the notebook he kept tucked inside a drawer. He opened it to a fresh page, picked up his pen, and wrote. Sometimes silence is the loudest truth. There's nothing like family dinner to remind you where your place isn't. Emily stood on the porch of her childhood home, holding a basket of freshly baked bread wrapped in a linen towel. Theo stood beside her, one hand in his pocket, the other gently resting on the small jar of lavender honey they had picked up at the farmer's market that morning. Inside, faint strains of Debussy spilled from the living room speakers, the kind of soft classical music her mother played only on special occasions, which typically meant when Sabrina was in town. She gave Theo a half-smile before knocking twice. Her mother opened the door with a flutter of pearls and perfume, her lips parting into a warm, rehearsed smile. "Emily, darling." "Theo. Come in." The house smelled faintly of lemon polish and roasted chicken. The cherrywood dining table had been set with cloth napkins and the delicate porcelain flatware only brought out for holidays or, as was now tradition, when Sabrina visited. A vase of white tulips anchored the center. Her father appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Smells wonderful," he said to no one in particular. He gave Theo a firm but distant nod, then turned to Emily. "How was school?" "Busy. We're finishing up unit finals." Sabrina entered a moment later, wearing cream slacks and a silk blouse the color of rose. She leaned in, kissed Emily on the cheek, then turned to Theo with a smile that never quite touched her eyes. "You brought bread," she said, glancing at the basket. "How rustic." Theo smiled gently. "It's honey oat. We used fresh yeast." "And local honey," Emily added, holding up the small jar. Their mother accepted it with a polite, "How lovely," and set it aside on the buffet, where it sat untouched for the rest of the evening. They sat down, the air tinged with the faint hum of muted news from the TV in the adjacent room, footage of Manhattan real estate listings flashing behind a silent anchor. Dinner began in a hush of utensils and curated pleasantries. Theo commented on the herb crust of the chicken, Emily asked her father about his new greenhouse, and her mother spoke of a neighbor's upcoming retirement cruise. For a moment, it was almost pleasant. Then Sabrina placed her fork down and turned to Theo. "So, Theo," she said, resting her chin on one manicured hand, "how did you get into bartending?" "I took a part-time job at a small place in upstate New York after college," he replied. "Realized I enjoyed it." She tilted her head. "College?" "Hospitality management," he said simply. She reached for her water glass. "But don't you want more? You seem capable." "More than what?" Theo asked, still calm. Sabrina laughed softly. "Well, a man your age, I imagine most would want to build something. Own a business. Invest. Or at least have a 5-year plan." Theo met her gaze without flinching. "I'm building something. It just doesn't require a skyline view." Their mother shifted in her seat, glancing at the salt shaker and gently nudging it a half-inch to the left. Emily stepped in quickly. "Sabrina, remember when we used to sneak into Dad's office and play with the label maker? You made fake IDs for your dolls." Sabrina didn't look away from Theo. "That was before I knew dolls didn't have to settle." Her father cleared his throat. "Let's not." "No, it's fine," Theo said, his voice even. "I'm used to the question." Sabrina leaned back. "I'm not judging. I'm just curious. You two are so stable. A teacher and a bartender. It's very," she searched for a word, "predictable." Emily's face flushed. "Sabrina." But Sabrina kept going. "So, a bartender and a teacher walk into a retirement plan, what happens next?" Theo's response came without hesitation, soft and steady. "Maybe they walk out with something money can't measure." The room went still. Her mother blinked. Her father looked at his plate. The salt shaker was moved again, half an inch to the right this time. Sabrina's mouth twitched into something that resembled a smile, but not quite. Dessert came and went with few words exchanged. When it was time to leave, Theo helped Emily into her coat and thanked her parents. Sabrina walked them to the door. As they stepped out into the cool May evening, she leaned in, lips close to Emily's ear. "You're downgrading yourself, and you don't even see it. A picture may be worth 1,000 words, but one message undid them all." The arch of hanging flower baskets swayed gently in the breeze, framing Theo and Emily in a splash of early summer color. Emily tilted her head toward him, laughing as the camera clicked. A local reporter snapped another photo, saying something about Beacon Falls' favorite teacher finally getting her fairy tale. Theo just smiled, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. The newspaper ran the photo the next morning above a tiny write-up tucked beside the obituaries. It wasn't front-page news, but in Beacon Falls, it didn't need to be. At Deli and Brew, the copy sat folded on Mr. Fletcher's table. He adjusted his glasses, read the caption aloud with a chuckle, and nodded to himself. "About time," he murmured before turning the page. Later that day, the photo hit the town's Facebook group. Comments rolled in, heart emojis, congratulatory gifs, fond memories of Emily from former students and parents alike. At the end of the day, she counted more than 300 reactions and dozens of comments. Someone had even posted a blurry photo of Theo carrying groceries for a neighbor. "Good man," someone else replied. "Quiet, but polite." It was the kind of joy that doesn't shout. Just settles. Real. That night, over takeout noodles and root beer, Emily rested her head on Theo's shoulder, scrolling through the comments. "They love us." "They love you," he corrected, brushing her hair back. But in the quiet after dinner, her phone buzzed again. The message came from an unknown number. "No greeting. Just. He's fooling you. Ask him who he really is." Emily stared at it. The words looked harmless, but they landed heavy. She didn't say anything at first. She placed the phone face down on the table and started folding the cardboard takeout containers. When Theo came back from washing dishes, he noticed the shift in her face. "You okay?" "Fine," she lied, forcing a smile. 2 days later, Sabrina called. "Seriously," was the first word out of her mouth. Emily didn't answer. A public engagement photo? In a basket arch, no less. Sabrina's voice oozed disdain. "What are you, the town's homecoming queen?" Emily exhaled slowly. "It's just a photo, Sabrina. It's a statement. One that says, I've settled." Emily's throat tightened. "Bartenders don't marry Harper women," Sabrina continued. "Not ones worth remembering, anyway." "Sabrina. You're throwing away a name with weight, Emily. A name that meant something." Emily closed her eyes, sinking into the silence that followed. The words curled around her like smoke, not choking, but lingering. The door opened behind her. Theo stepped in, drying his hands on a dish towel. He took one look at her and stopped. Emily, phone still in hand, said nothing. Her shoulders trembled. He walked over, crouched down beside her, and simply wrapped his arms around her. No questions. No requests. Just presence. She leaned into him and let the tears fall, silent and steady. Later that week, Emily stepped out of the diner after her morning coffee and grading session. The sky was cloudless, the sun warm. A flyer fluttered on the corkboard beside the door, annual Labor Day community dance, sign-ups open. She barely noticed. As she turned to leave, Mr. Fletcher called out to her from his table by the window. "My dear, people who judge love don't understand its weight. But you do." Emily stepped into the chapel with her heart pounding and her gown flowing, only to be greeted by her sister's thunder. The soft chords of the organ drifted through the sun-warmed air inside the Beacon Falls Community Chapel, each note echoing gently beneath the wooden beams above. The late afternoon light poured in through stained glass, painting the pews with colors too gentle to belong to any fight. Guests stood and turned as Emily Harper entered, her gown brushing the aisle like wind across linen. Her eyes locked on Theo, standing calm and still beneath the crossbeams, hands clasped in front of him, his smile faint but anchored. She hadn't expected to cry, but as she reached the halfway mark, something in her chest loosened. It was all real. All here. The nerves, the breathless joy, the hum of violins. Stop. The word cracked through the chapel like a rifle shot. Everything froze. Sabrina. She stood from the second row, her voice echoing, heels clicking against wood as she stepped into the aisle. Her red dress stood out like a flare against the soft florals and ivory lace. Her face was flushed, jaw tight, eyes burning. You can't marry him, she shouted. He's using you. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Emily stopped mid-step. The officiant lowered his book. In the front pew, their mother blinked rapidly while their father whispered something under his breath. Theo didn't move. Sabrina turned toward the guests now, sweeping her arms in a wide gesture. Does no one else see this? My sister, the best student in our family, is marrying a bartender. A bartender. He's charming, sure, polite. But that's how cons work, isn't it? He's climbing the ladder, on her back. Whispers spread like brushfire. The organist, unsure, let the last chord trail off in a dissonant hum. Emily could feel her heart stutter. Every instinct begged her to run, to cry, to scream back. But before she could speak, someone else rose. An older man near the back of the chapel. Gray suit. Cane beside him. Calm eyes. Arthur Marshall. He walked slowly down the center aisle, every step measured, his presence alone enough to hush the murmurs. He stopped beside Sabrina and turned toward the room. My name is Arthur Marshall, he said. Perhaps you've seen the name carved in marble somewhere in Manhattan. Silence. Even the chapel air seemed to still. Arthur turned to Theo. This young man owns more than buildings, he said softly. He owns integrity. More silence, then gasps. Sabrina took a step back, mouth slightly open, face draining of color. Her hand trembled as she looked between Emily and Theo. In the front row, Mr. Fletcher leaned slightly to the woman beside him and whispered, sometimes the loudest fall is the one no one applauds. She once looked down from a Manhattan balcony, now she stood shivering on a wooden porch in Beacon Falls. Rain tapped steadily against the awning above the front door. The porch light flickered once, then held. Emily opened the door to find her sister standing on the doormat, soaked to the skin. Her beige coat clung to her shoulders like wet cardboard, mascara trailing down her cheeks in quiet surrender. No suitcase, no purse, no umbrella, just Sabrina Harper, stripped of every shield she'd ever worn. They froze everything, she said, voice flat. Michael's been indicted. Emily didn't respond. She simply stepped aside. Inside, the warmth was almost cruel in contrast. Sabrina stood awkwardly by the doorway, shoes dripping on the mat. Theo appeared from the kitchen, sleeves rolled, drying his hands on a faded cloth. He paused at the sight of her but said nothing until Emily nodded faintly. There's a small apartment above the hearth, he said. Warm, clean. Has a bed and a working fridge. Sabrina looked between them. You'd let me stay? You can, Theo replied, but there's a condition. She waited. You work. The pause stretched. At the restaurant? She asked, almost incredulous. Theo nodded. Kitchen shifts start at 6. Maria will show you the ropes. Emily fetched a towel and handed it over without a word. The next morning, Beacon Falls stirred beneath a gray October sky. Steam from deli and brew curled into the air as Mr. Fletcher took his usual seat by the window. He watched as a figure emerged from the alley beside the hearth, hair tucked under a borrowed cap, shoulders hunched against the wind. Inside the kitchen, the scent of bleach and burnt toast hung in the air. Maria Delgado, stocky and stern with a voice that cut through clatter, handed Sabrina a pair of rubber gloves and pointed toward the sink. Kyle will show you the sorting trays. Plates on the left. Glassware stacked right. No perfume, no fake nails, no whining. Sabrina nodded, swallowing hard. By noon, her back ached and her hands were pruny. Kyle, a college student with earbuds constantly dangling, said little beyond a here and not like that. Every dropped fork or splash of grease felt like a spotlight. At 2:17 p.m., it happened. She grabbed a metal tray straight from the oven. Her scream was sharp, instinctual. She dropped the tray, clutching her hand as tears welled in her eyes. Maria didn't flinch. "Use mitts," she said, turning back to the stove. "This isn't a pity kitchen." Sabrina stood frozen, shoulders shaking. Then slowly, she reached for the gloves, pulled them on, and got back to work. That night, the apartment above the hearth felt cavernous despite its size. A single lamp cast yellow light onto bare walls. There was one mattress, one chipped mug in the cupboard, and a sticky note on the fridge in Theo's handwriting. "Dignity starts with dish soap." The next morning, Mr. Fletcher sat by the window, hands wrapped around his coffee mug. Across the street, he watched the woman in the borrowed uniform exit the hearth's back door, tie her apron, and adjust her grip on the empty crate she carried. He didn't wave. He just nodded once, and took a long, slow sip. 3 months of sweat, humility, and silence. Now, the woman once feared to look down is the one standing tall behind the counter. The hearth glowed with the warmth of Thanksgiving. Pumpkin-scented candles flickered in mason jars along the windowsills, their light catching the golden edges of stacked pie trays. The air smelled of roasted turkey, cinnamon-spiced cider, and toasted bread, the kind of smell that told you, even if you'd never been here before, that you were welcome to stay. Sabrina stood behind the front counter, sleeves rolled, apron freshly pressed. Her posture was upright, not stiff. Confident, not proud. She adjusted the seating chart one more time, then turned to check on Kyle, who was balancing a tray of cranberry sauce and extra rolls. "Careful with table 5, she reminded him. "Mrs. Langley's grandson has a peanut allergy." Kyle gave her a quick nod, the kind that didn't need words. She returned it with a smile. The hearth was full tonight, not just with regulars but with neighbors who had no one else to dine with. A retired couple whose children lived 3 states away, a single father with twins too young to sit still, 3 elderly sisters who still wore Sunday hats. Maria moved quietly through the dining room, not barking orders for once, just watching. Occasionally, she gave a subtle nod whenever Sabrina stepped in before a tray slipped or gently offered a different dessert when someone hesitated over the menu. At one table, a toddler burst into tears when the whipped cream on her pie collapsed. Without pause, Sabrina crouched down and whispered something only the child could hear. A moment later, the girl giggled through her sniffles. Mr. Fletcher, seated near the fireplace, waited until Sabrina passed by to extend a small wrapped bundle. She looked at it with surprise. "It's a book," he said simply. "One that helped me find my footing when the world made me feel small." She unfolded the brown paper. "A tree grows in Brooklyn." Inside the front cover, he had written in blue ink, "So do people." The dinner moved like clockwork. Plates cleared, second helpings offered, cider refilled without request. At one point, Theo stepped up beside Sabrina at the counter, a folded paper in his hand. "Maria's transferring to our New Haven location after the holidays," he said. "We'll need someone to step up here." She looked at him, brows raised. "Are you offering me the job?" "I'm offering you the opportunity," he replied. "If you want it." "Only if I earn it," she answered. From a few feet away, Emily, folding napkins into fans for dessert plates, looked up and smiled. As the meal came to a close, murmurs of contentment settled like a soft quilt across the room. Sabrina stood near the end of the long farmhouse table and cleared her throat gently. "I used to think power was who listened to you," she said. "Now I know it's who trusts you enough to speak." Silence followed, but not the kind from awkwardness. It was the kind that came when everyone, for a moment, felt the same thing. After the tables were cleared and the last of the guests trickled out into the cool night, Sabrina changed into her coat and stepped outside. She didn't return to the apartment above the restaurant. Instead, she walked 2 blocks to the chapel. The air was cold but not cruel. Moonlight skimmed across the stained glass windows like memory. She stepped inside, lit by the faint flicker of candlelight near the altar, and approached the front pew. From her coat pocket, she pulled out a small linen napkin, carefully folded. It bore the initials THE from the set Emily had saved for their engagement dinner. Sabrina placed it on the wood gently, then sat down beside it, eyes shining in the dim light. She wiped her tears with the edge. After all the noise had settled and the dishes had been cleared, what lingered wasn't the grandeur of a hidden fortune, but the quiet grace of a woman who chose to start again. Sabrina's journey from judgment to humility reminds us that true worth isn't stitched into a label or framed in a skyline, it's measured in how we rise after we've been brought low. Like a candle placed in a windowsill on a stormy night, simple kindness can guide even the most lost among us home. If this story stirred something in you, perhaps today is the day to offer warmth to someone walking through their own quiet fall. Because sometimes, the most powerful transformations happen when no one is watching.